Hello, passengers, and welcome aboard the TV Pilot's License with service to Formula One racing. We ask that you please fasten your headphones, secure your podcasting device, and remember, this week's pilots will be doing qualifying laps during the flight, so buckle up. Your DRS is now activated.
Welcome to the TV Pilot's License. My name is Geoff Kerbis, joined by Max Singer and Rich Inman. How you boys doing today?
I'm well. Here on a podcast, we cast about pods and racing. Yes, it's a podcast. I'm Will Buxton.
Yeah, the
Rich,
most
how are you,
important
bud?
part about podcasting is the talking. And if you are watching us on YouTube or Spotify right now, join along with me because I am doing hot laps at Spa in a Volkswagen Jetta, and I'm going to keep doing this the entire episode, see how many times I crash or if I crash at all.
You know, they say something about texting and driving. I've never heard anything about podcasting and driving.
That's because it's legal.
Well, gentlemen, this week we are going to be discussing the Netflix docuseries Drive to Survive. But before we do so, it appears an up-and-coming driver is seeking a chance to get one of the prestigious racing seats on the TV Pilot's License. And I feel like we should give them a chance. This week's guest is an actor, comedian, and podcaster who has appeared in a variety of shows, including Mythic Quest, American Horror Stories, Reasonable Doubt, 13 Reasons Why, 30 Rock, and TV Pilot's License favorite, 911. You can catch him as Larry in Freaky Tales, coming to theaters April 4th of 2025, and listen to him anywhere you find podcasts, including watching him on YouTube on the WTF1 podcast. Please welcome James Coker. James, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Welcome.
Y'all, thank you so much for having me. And wow, to get the opportunity to speak with Will Buxton in person is such an absolute treat.
Oh my gosh. Well, James, we are so excited to have you today. You know, I think a lot of people know you probably from social media for some of the amazing things and content that you create around F1. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into this sport?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my introduction to Formula One is the show that we're going to be talking about today. It's Drive to Survive. About 2 years ago, my wife and I decided to watch the first season at a recommendation of some of our friends. We immediately got hooked on the show. I think, binged at the time all 5 seasons in the course of like 3 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
And I started going down like the rabbit hole of like Formula One and started watching races. But how I started as like a F1 content creator was a total accident. It was a fluke, like, because I've been doing comedy for 10, 15 years now. I did improv and sketch comedy in New York at Upright Citizens Brigade and The Pit and The Magnet, and have been making sketches online for over a decade. And I would always have like some stuff like pop off and go viral, but I was never able to like cultivate a following or anything like that. And my wife and I, after watching Drive to Survive, started as a joke doing team talk to each other in the car. Like, I'm not even a car person. I drive a Prius. And I would pretend to be I'd be the driver and she'd be like the race engineer doing team radio to me, saying like, box, push, like, do you have more pace, things like that. And I was like, oh, this is really funny. Like, pull out your phone and film us doing this. And I'll cut it into a video. And I cut that up and I put it on my Instagram, not thinking much about it. And it went super viral. And ESPN picked it up, Sports Illustrated picked it up, motorsport.com picked it up. And I was like, okay, I still have footage from when we did this to make a few more videos. So I made 3 more versions of that video. Those went viral. So I was like, nice. Okay, like, that's cool. Let me make one more F1 related video. And I made one comparing like Formula One teams to NFL franchises. And, I was like, Ferrari are like the Cowboys. They're the most iconic team in the sport with one of the largest fan bases, but they haven't won in a long time. I was like, Mercedes are like the Patriots. Red Bull is like the Chiefs. That went viral. So I was like, okay, let me make I'll keep making F1 content until it stops getting engagement.
Sure.
And it never stopped getting engagement. And then all of a sudden I'd painted myself into this corner and into this very specific niche. And whenever I tried to make something that wasn't Formula One related, like nobody cared, because that's why everyone was following me. So it happened like by accident and very organically, but it's been really fun. Not just to learn more about Formula One, but like all of motorsport. I now watch like WEC or WEC or World Endurance Championship. I partnered with Formula E last year and made a lot of content about their series and attended a bunch of races. I'm working with IndyCar this year, it's been a blast.
How do you feel about Draco Malfoy himself, Tom Felton, getting into Formula E racing this year?
I think it's cool. I mean, like they're doing the Gen Evo sessions, and like I feel like the people they're selecting. And if anyone listening is not familiar with what's going on, Formula E is doing a thing called Gen Evo sessions where they're pairing a celebrity with each of the 11 Formula E teams, and that person is then training like a Formula E driver, and they're going through the regimen and they're meeting with the teams and they're doing simulators, and then they're going to drive an actual Gen 3 Evo car at an event in Miami in a week. I think it's like a March 5th or 6th. And I think they're driving around a modified version of the Miami Autodrome, which essentially is just the parking lot of the Hard Rock Stadium that they turn into the Miami Grand Prix for Formula One. And Tom Felton is one of those people. He's like paired with Envision. I know Cleo Abram, who's a fantastic YouTuber, is paired with Neil McLaren. There's a number of other ones, I believe. Amelia Harford, I think is her name. She was in the movie Gran Turismo. She's paired with Nissan, I believe. And like Brooklyn Beckham which was like a random one, is paired with TCS Jaguar Racing. So it's like there's some people where it makes a lot of sense. It's like, oh, this person is in motorsport and they are passionate about it already. It makes sense for them. Tom Felton was like kind of a surprise, but he seems excited about it. So.
Yeah, God bless Brooklyn Beckham. He's tried to be a photographer. He's tried to be a restaurateur. Now he's racing cars. He's going to find it. He's going to figure it out.
Or he's just a Renaissance man, you know?
Yeah. Once he gets into sketch comedy, I think that's where he'll really figure it out.
A hundo pay. Yeah.
Well, before we dive too deep into Drive to Survive, for folks who are here for the first time, maybe folks who are frequent flyers, or folks who are here just to hear James' takes about Drive to Survive, Max, do you mind telling folks what this podcast is all about?
Here at TV Pilot's License, we break down and analyze the pilot episodes of some of TV's most famous, or in some cases, infamous shows. We learn more about how these shows came to be and were originally made, if they're effective pilot episodes and making us want to watch more and if they can be made today. Go back and stream our old episodes from wherever you listen to podcasts. Check us out on YouTube and TikTok to see our smiling faces. And if it is your first time flying with us, then welcome aboard.
And Rich, what is your question of the week?
Well, I want to know because all four of us, big F1 fans now, after I have actually similarly done the same amount of evangelizing that you're used to, James, that got you into this in the first place, I, over the pandemic, kept messaging our group chat about how great Drive to Survive is, and you guys are all missing out. And after doing that for about a year and a half, I finally got some buy-in from them to actually watch it. And now everyone is super into Formula One, which is very exciting for me. I am very curious to know if you guys have any extremely spicy takes for the 2025 F1 season. What is the craziest thing you guys think will happen?
Well, Max, you were pretty excited about yours, so I'm going to let you go first.
All right, I think outlandish but not impossible. I'm predicting a Williams podium this season. Yeah. I think that the stars can align, and one of those two, in Carlos Sainz or Alex Albon, can be advantageous and land on the podium. And then my real spicy one is that Sauber ends up without a sponsor by the end of the season. I think that you can only be sponsored by a crypto casino for so long before something happens, and that Sauber will have a different team sponsor before the year is up.
Both of these are very realistic.
Well, James, after Max's takes, do you have something quite as spicy?
I was going to say a Carlos Sainz podium as well. And other people have said this, where like there's a chance he gets a podium, but it will be under like conditions similar to how Alpine got the double podium at Brazil in the wet. But yeah, I think there's a chance Carlos Sainz gets a podium this year.
think that's
Rich,
really
I'm
solid.
curious about you because you're, probably the most dated, and that's a weird thing to say on this podcast
Yeah.
of F1 fans.
Yeah, I'm old as hell. So James, so I started watching Formula One with my dad when I was about the age of 3. So
Wow.
I started with the Michael Schumacher like Benetton years,
Mm-hmm.
and then I don't believe I watched the race where Ayrton Senna passed away, but I would be too young to remember if I did, anyways. I would say right now, I think you guys are all on the mark with Williams coming back in a way that is going to be not just like reminiscent of their stronger years of when they had like the super dominant cars in the 70s and 80s. I do see a podium for Sainz or Albon. Albon is doing exceptionally well in that Williams, for what it is. But I definitely do see a pretty drastic improvement on the way from Aston Martin. I do think, and I'm a bit of a homer because Fernando is one of my favorite drivers. I do think that they are going to come back in a way that is a little bit more consistent than when they started a couple of years ago, and Fernando was like consistently on the podium for the first like half of the season, and then they completely fell off. I think we're going to start seeing some more dominance out of them, and with Adrian Newey, who's like the car whisperer on their team, I think we're going to start getting a lot more like prowess from Aston Martin.
Yeah, and for myself, I'm just going to finish up very simply. I think the talk of the town is 4-letter words and whether or not they belong in F1 and the consequences of 4-letter words. And I think we are going to see multiple drivers get suspensions from cursing
way.
too much.
Oh, Jeff, I thought you were talking about Ford making powertrain units.
I thought you were going to say Haas.
But I genuinely think that we're going to see at least 2 drivers, both of them may or may not have to do with the Red Bull family, have to sit out a race because they get a little bit too colorful with their driver language.
Oh, man, full race suspension. That is spicy.
Yeah. So I'm ready for it. And Rich, thank you so much for that question of the week.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about Drive to Survive. And we're going to start off with a quick synopsis. A docuseries following the FIA Formula One World Championship Series across multiple seasons. That is the most accurate synopsis I have ever read in my entire life. Thank you, IMDb. But, Max, can you tell us a little bit more about how this show got made?
Today we are talking about the first episode, pilot, fucking who cares, of Drive to Survive, titled All to Play For, which originally aired on March 8th, 2019 on Netflix. And instead of talking about one creator, we're going to talk about how this whole project really came to be, as Drive to Survive is a commissioned project between Formula One, Liberty Media, and Netflix. In 2017, Liberty Media, an American media group, purchased a controlling interest in F1. In an attempt to inject new life into the sport, they hired David Hill, former president of Fox Sports, creator of the NFL on Fox, and the brains behind the virtual first down marker on your TV set. Taking a page out of Fox's NASCAR playbook, Hill called for more cameras on the track and for the mics to be turned all the way up to lure the viewer in with the roar of the engines. Sound engineering plays a big role, and he also recruited the hiring of composer Brian Tyler, who scored films for the Fast and Furious franchise, to do the sport's music. Liberty's biggest goal is to attract a younger demographic and utilize social media to promote the sport. They approached Netflix about the potential for an all-access series, but received resistance due to the lack of interest in the sport at the time in the US, which was far and away the streamer's largest subscriber base. To help shape the series, Liberty Media recruits documentary producer James Gay Reese, who is behind the Academy Award-nominated films Exit Through the Gift Shop and Amy, as well as the BAFTA-winning documentary Senna. At the time, James Gay Reese was exploring his own film on Red Bull Racing. The second time around, Netflix signs on and production begins. 8 of the 10 teams signed on for an all-access look, the 2 exceptions for Season 1 being Ferrari, who were cautious about the concept of the production, and Mercedes, who were actually actively shopping their own series to Amazon at the time and had a contractual conflict. The original intention was to focus on the races and the drivers, but off-track drama captured on film caused the team to realize they stumbled onto something much more different. To quote show editor Matt Rudge in an interview with GQ last year, "This was like Succession or Billions. Major money, people with axes to grind in a cutthroat world. It's not the drama on the track, it's the drama off the track."
Well, Max, thank you so much for that intro. So let's dive into this pilot, right? We get a very dramatic introduction where we have a Daniel Ricciardo voiceover over the streets of what appears to be Melbourne. Excuse me for my mispronunciation. I am an American. And I'd love to hear, James, as far as introducing the sport of F1, how compelling do you think using Daniel Ricciardo and his thoughts about flying and all of these things are to bring you into the sport?
I think that first, like, it's like a 2-minute and change, like, montage. I thought did a very good job sort of setting the stage and like building the suspense and hype up for the series and the sport, because I went into it totally blind.
Sure.
Like, not only had I never seen a Formula One Grand Prix before in my life, I had never watched any race ever. Like, I'd never watched a NASCAR race. I don't think I'd ever watched the Indianapolis 500. So I really had no idea what was going on. And transitioning from like that montage where they're sort of setting the stage for what sort of the themes of the multiple plot lines are going to be over the course of the season, and then giving us an up close look into who Daniel Ricciardo is as a person, I thought was pretty brilliant, because they're trying to like craft this very specific narrative where Daniel Ricciardo is our protagonist in the story. And we, especially as new fans who aren't familiar with Formula One at all, immediately imprint on him. And we're like, okay, this guy is the hero of the story.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and Rich, you were shaking your head, yes, nodding along as you were driving through the course of Spa. And I'm curious,
the countryside of Belgium.
I'm curious from your perspective, how good of a job do you think that this first episode does of sort of connecting us with Daniel Ricciardo on an emotional level?
Well, I think this entire pilot episode gives us three protagonists, right? So number one is Daniel Ricciardo, who is not only camera friendly and media trained, he is very much himself. And I think we get a lot of, not to compare it to like something that's like very scripted or anything like that, but like it up until this point, Formula One was like WWE Attitude Era. It was like, we want James Hunt smoking cigarettes in the pit lane. We want Michael Schumacher going to fight someone who just cut him off and ruined his race and stuff like that in the pit lane. Like, it's bad boys of racing. It is, it's cussing each other out in French and shit like that. So I think what this gives you is like, oh, now the new era of racing is people who are extremely young, extremely adept at driving, but also they're going to be goofy with each other, which is kind of a side of F1 that you don't get to see normally without actually knowing the drivers personally. Like, you don't really get that from, I mean, you get it a little bit from like their press conferences and stuff like that, but it's not what we're used to. So it gives us Daniel Ricciardo, who's like charming as hell. You can see from the very beginning how much love he's going to get, despite his career like eventually tailing off, like pretty soon after they make this pilot. And then you get Guenther Steiner, who's the team principal of Haas, and then you also get Will Buxton, who becomes like kind of like the de facto narrator for the entire series. And I think they do a really good job of setting how important each one of these people are to racing individually. Like, you get to see the wealth of it from the Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull kind of aspect. You get to see the paupers of F1, which are Haas, and then you also get to see journalism, which it has historically made F1 exciting, but also like extremely like eye roll groaning way to do it, or like as a sport to watch. It is like riddled with paparazzi like storytelling and stuff like that, and shitty journalism and all that good stuff. But yeah, it makes it exciting. It makes it like a soap opera on wheels.
Max, I'm curious from your perspective, because this is the first documentary style show that we have done on the TV Pilot's License. And to show a little peek behind the curtain, you have personally objected to us doing much documentary style stuff on the podcast.
Oh,
so
spicy in the chat.
I'm going to sort of put you in the spotlight and ask, what do you think, or how do you think this show differentiates itself and is able to find some form of a structure as a TV show? And do you think it does a good job of that?
So I think what Drive Survive succeeds in doing, and why it's kind of broken out of the confinement of people who just watch documentaries, is that we are building narratives after the fact. A typical sports documentary, your ESPN 30 for 30, we're covering a subject, whether it's a specific moment or kind of a Wikipedia-style entry, and everything's being done after the fact. We know what we want to hit on, we know what we're highlighting, and we are just going to build a narrative about points that already exist. At Drive Survive, the show it actually shares the most DNA with is the Real Housewives franchise.
Yep.
And
Nailed it.
And I mean, I thought Rich was going to hang up when I mentioned his favorite show we've ever done on this podcast. But, Real Housewives, you film all access, you put together these events in Drive Survive. It's the 20-some-odd races where everyone's together, but you don't know what's going to happen when we put these people in a room, when you put them on a track. And I think the best example of this isn't Danny, but it's our second major plot line of Haas Racing. Mm-hmm. Haas is an 8th-place team the year before. They do not have the money to compete with the likes of the top of the grid. So why do we spend so much time on Haas? Well, first off, we filmed their team principal, who Rich mentioned, Guenther Steiner, who is affable, he's funny, he's charismatic. Okay, we have an into a team that might be interesting. All right, we have a scrappy underdog story. Those scrappy underdogs just qualified 5th and 6th on the grid in quals. Okay, now I'm interested in this story. And then the wheels literally fall off for Haas in the race. So if I'm filming this, if I'm in the editing bay, suddenly I have an entire story. I can make you like Haas. I can do confessionals to build up Haas as the plucky underdog and make you feel really crestfallen, like rip your heart out when things go south for them in, Melbourne on race day. And that's Housewives 101.
Yep.
So, James, I want to pull you in here really quickly because Max brings up probably one of the, I think, the biggest star of this pilot. As much as Daniel Ricciardo is thrusted upon us, I think Guenther is the person who truly benefited maybe the most from this show of any of the characters of F1 over the past 7 years, right? Literally has a book that is titled very similarly to this show. What do you think makes Guenther so enjoyable as far as like this episode goes?
I think it has to do with the fact that he is not as polished as most of the other team principals are. The other team principals that you see, people likes of like Toto Wolff and Christian Horner and Zach Brown. I know he's not a team principal; he's the CEO of McLaren. But they, I feel like they have an arsenal of sound bites in the chamber ready to be released at any time that they can apply to any question that's asked towards them.
Yeah.
Where Guenther is like more like raw and rough around the edges and also is like a little goofy. And I feel like that endears the audience to him. Like you just kind of fall in love with him because you're like, oh, this is just a dude who is a mechanic who like loves the sport or whatever, but like isn't like a polished businessman the way other people in this role are. And I think that's why people love him so much.
It's like redneck German almost. It's like,
yes.
Like you could put Guenther in a NASCAR garage and have him be as folksy as he is now.
He is Italian though, but yes, he's German speaking. Yeah, he's Italian, but like in an area of Italy where they speak German.
Oh, okay. So like near the Switzerland border.
Yeah.
Whatever. Okay.
Yeah. So I have a question for the three of you, as this is for many people who have watched this show. This is their introduction to F1. How good do you think it does in actually portraying what a weekend is like for any Grand Prix? Because I think that's one of the, to take us out of just the pilot, that's one of the big problems that people have with Drive to Survive is it's like, this is sort of like, it's the Mickey Mouse version of F1. It's the storytelling, but is that what we need in order to have a compelling docuseries?
Well, I think it's interesting what they leave out in general with, like, especially with the first weekend of the year. The biggest part of that first weekend is no one really knows the actual speed of the cars. No one knows how well these cars are doing until that first qualifying lap from this weekend, which I thought they were going to talk about just a little bit more, where it was like that's the most crucial 15 minutes in the entire season. That is because you can sandbag through testing, you can sandbag through the first 3 practices, you can focus on like actual race speed instead of qualifying speed. But when it comes to that qualifying, it is the most crucial part of the entire year.
James, what about yourself?
What I thought it was so interesting about this show, and I did not realize because I had never watched Formula One before, is that the quote unquote broadcast commentary that you're listening throughout all the episodes is not pulled from a broadcast. It's not pulled from the Sky Sports broadcast. It's not pulled from F1 TV. It is a script written by Box to Box Films that they're having an actor or a commentator read to help them craft their narrative, which I thought was so interesting. But I did not realize that until I had already watched the entire series and I'd watched a few races. Like, if you're a seasoned Formula One fan and you hear that, you're like, wait a minute, that's not Crofty's voice, or that's not Jolyon Palmer or Alex Jakes.
Or Brundle, like...
Yeah, or Alex Brundle or Martin Brundle. But like, but to the untrained ear, to a fan that's not familiar with it, you just assume that they're pulling actual commentary from the race, which I thought was super interesting. And I think one of the reasons why you don't get an accurate feeling for what a race weekend is like, because a lot of what happens in a Grand Prix weekend is pretty boring. Like, I like tuning into free practice, but I watch free practice in a very passive way. You know, I'll put it on the background. I'm not sitting on the edge of my seat, like, watching them do times, because they're running different setups, they're running different fuel loads. A lot of it is just like for the drivers and the teams to get a feel for the circuit and to run different setups and see what they want to do in quali in the race. So I think they eliminate a lot of that stuff in Drive to Survive and focus on the story, because this show is not for the hardcore Formula One fan. It's to introduce new people to the sport.
Exactly.
And to get them interested in it. And they draw them in with like the human element of it. And if you get interested in that, and then you want to watch a sport, and then you want to watch, then you want to start learning sort of more the subtle nuances of like the science and physics of the sport and the other like aspects of the sport, that's great. But that's not what this show is. This show is to get you like interested from, just get you interested in the sport to begin with. It's not supposed to be like an in-depth analysis.
100%.
And I think to go even deeper on that, James, and I love everything you brought up there, to serve as a true pilot, we can't spend 20 minutes showing you when the cars are in the garage with the tubes hooked up to them and the covers on the wheels, and we're doing engine cooling. We can't talk tire strategy. No one's going to care about that. But what we care about is using quotes like fighter pilot mentality, and we care about the way that we set this up, where we don't show the crews getting off and then them doing a formation lap and zigzagging and warming their tires. We just slow everything down. We do this great slow-mo effect. We then just like rocket fuel them out of the gate, and we hit you hard with sounds and with visuals, and we're creating this concept for you, which is, we'll get to all that other stuff later on, but right now we know why you're here, and it's to see all of these cool dudes go zoom in cars, and we're going to focus on building personalities. And yes, I do think that both Guenther and Danny should be on season 4 of The Traitors. Thank you so much for asking my opinion on this.
Wow.
I would love that.
Oh God, I want that so bad.
Yeah, I think what this show comes down to is it's the childlike element of like cars go zoom zoom, right? And we want to see cars go zoom zoom. And like Max, when you were talking about the sound engineering and all that sort of stuff, it's like, yeah, because I want to hear the car go vroom, and like I want to enjoy that. I welcome you all to do your own car passing you, but
Sorry.
At the end of the day, I do think that there is, when you're building a documentary, Max, you put it perfectly. The 20 minutes sitting inside of the garage. No one wants to explain, well, there's qual 1, and then there's qual 2, and then there's qual 3, and then 5 people get out. And I found myself, because I was watching this with my wife for the first time for her, and she was asking all these questions, and I was like, holy shit, you know what? This doesn't do the best job of bringing you into the sport. What it excels at is making you connect with certain characters, like the entire team of Haas. And Max, you mentioned it, with the idea of you're telling me that the guys on the pit crew screwed up tightening the wheel caps, not just once, but twice, and that was their race after training an entire week, and we got that amazing behind-the-scenes conversation. That's where if you're watching this, you want to watch it for those stories, not for understanding F1.
This is like if in The Last Dance there was a towel boy that didn't wipe up Scottie Pippen and he slipped and broke his ankle.
But it's almost as if that scene where Guenther is talking to the pit crew member who didn't secure the wheel and is sort of forgives him and gives him a pat on the back. That's Guenther Steiner's save the cat moment.
Yeah. Oh my God. It
is. It also it really illustrates, I think, in that particular moment, how little can go wrong to ruin a race weekend that arguably costs, even for Haas, it probably costs $10 million to set up the car, all of the all the flights and logistics and stuff like that. And it's not just we lost one game in Kansas City, let's pack it up home and only a 2-hour bus ride back or whatever. You were on the opposite side of the planet and in a completely different hemisphere, and everyone there's 600,000 people there to watch this weekend and all that shit. And it's it could go away literally that easily.
Rich, is it safe to say this is the most expensive pilot we've ever covered on this podcast?
Yeah, I would say so.
So this pilot ends in a very poetic way when Guenther sort of says why you should watch more. Why do you watch Formula One? Each race should have a story. And, that is maybe the drawing in of press that next episode. And that's the end of this pilot. But I'm curious, there are a lot of aspects of this pilot that maybe we did not discuss. I want to see if there are any things that you loved about this pilot that maybe you want to give a little bit more shine. Max, anything that you're thinking?
I'm going to give a shout out to the Ricardos, Daddy's mother and father. We get the real concern in a parent's eyes of the danger that is real in this sport. We talk about death. We talk about injury. We talk about what it's like to send a child away to train and learn to compete at the highest level and the toll that takes on a family. I think it gives a little bit of an insight into the sacrifice that goes into this sport without getting too bogged down in the details. And I think that they're just really compelling and earnest individuals in the time we spend with them, and they really lead us into that part of the sport.
James, what about you? Were there any moments that maybe we didn't talk about that you want to give a little shine?
I think what is so interesting to me is going back and watching this pilot now versus what Drive to Survive is like now and how Formula One presents itself on social media today. Because I think at that time we were still sort of in the early phase of Instagram, pivoting to video, and the earlier phases of Formula One teams really focusing on giving fans access, sort of like a peek behind the curtain of how their teams operate. And you're watching this in this area, and this is pre-cost cap, where a team like Mercedes and Ferrari can spend 5 or 6 times what a smaller team like Haas can spend. But I watched that, and then I just watched the trailer for season 7 this morning, which just dropped. And it's so funny watching the trailer for season 7 because I feel like all of the drivers and team principals and everybody that's gets interviewed for the show now knows what's going to make it into the edit. So they're all giving like the producers like these really juicy sound bites that they never would have thought of back then. Back then they were just kind of like existing in the space and like responding to whatever like the producers asked them. But I know now they go into these confessional interviews with like a list of things that they want to say because they're like, oh, this is going to be really good for the edit, or this is going to be really good for the trailer. And they're much more savvy as to like what can be said and how like we all know the show itself is going to craft a narrative, but they also know that there are certain things that they can say to help craft their own narrative as well.
Rich, what about yourself?
That's super smart. I 100% agree. And I actually wanted to tack on that. Like, I think this show is so influential now that I think the entire reason that Daniel Ricciardo got brought back to AlphaTauri, AlphaTauri V-Carb, whatever it's called now, I think that's entirely due to the show. I think in lieu of, I mean, you'll see as we go into like more episodes of the show how much politics and capitalism and ad sponsorship plays into who actually gets a chance to drive in F1. It's not necessarily like oh, you're the best, so here you go. Because that's not true. So I think some of the best drivers right now are in WEC. They're in IndyCar. I think as soon as like, Alex Palou or Joseph Newgarden or anything like that, if they get a chance in Indy, I think, or in F1, I think they're going to do really well. What I saw specifically in this show that I loved that, we hadn't really got into was the line, Kevin Magnussen sneaks past Max Verstappen. That will be the one and only time you will ever hear that in the entirety of your future F1 fandom. So enjoy that while you can.
Wait for my wait a minute moment, Rich. So the thing that I loved in this show is, as a former athlete, this gave me that little bit of like juice, right? Especially as someone who did racing did cycling, has done running races. It's that idea of like, when you are out on the course, when you are out on the field, it is you are flying, and there is danger, especially when in track cycling, around every corner. And I was like, oh yeah, adrenaline's pumping. It's way too late for that. I'm feeling hyped. But I do want to talk about wait a minute moments, things that caused you pause. And I'm going to start off with, this is the most Gene Haas you will ever see in this goddamn show.
There's a reason for that.
Allegedly. Everything now is allegedly. Everything Jeff's about to say is allegedly.
My dude is, it's sort of one of those things where like you hear about the kids who like they pick up the phone and they're like daddy, right? And it's just like, that is Gene Haas in the future of this show. Gene Haas is a phone that Guenther Steiner is holding up to his ear at all times and says, hi, Gene. And like that is all of him.
He's
and
Charlie
also,
in Charlie's Angels.
This is the most innocent version of Max Verstappen we will ever see on this show.
Yes.
We see him for like 20 seconds, and he looks like he literally just exited the womb, but he does that spin move, and I'm like, Max, you're going to spin again in the future. It's going to be the dopest thing you ever do during a race that you win. But holy
contextually,
shit.
do you want to tell more people about like who Max Verstappen is if this is their first time?
Yeah, I'll give some context. Max Verstappen is currently as of recording this, he's the four-time winning world champion. He is incredible at what he does and drives a very hard car to drive. If you are not into F1, just to explain, he's gone through like 4 different driving partners over the years, and every one of them sort of fails while he just shines and looks like a star. So I'd recommend reading more about that, and go on Wikipedia. You guys are smart. Go on Google.
What's so interesting is that Christian Horner just introduces him on the show. Like, Daniel is the main character, and then he's kind of an aside, and all Christian Horner says in the show is, he goes, he's this exciting emerging talent.
Which is
That's all they say about him.
Right.
This is after coming off of, wasn't it the previous year he won a race? He won his first race at 17 years old. And it's just like, it's wild the way that it was edited. James, I'm curious, any wait a minute moments looking back and watching this and knowing what you know now about F1?
I forgot that Kevin Magnussen was only 26 years old in this show.
I felt
know.
so old.
Yeah.
Because, one of the big things that I noticed watching this, I'm like, oh my God, Will Buxton looks so much younger. Oh my God, Christian Horner looks so much younger. Oh my God, Toto Wolff looks so much younger. But then Kevin Magnussen looks exactly the same. Yes. And he, at 26 years old, he looked 38 years old.
Yep.
And that was a wait a minute moment for me. Also, I think they missed an opportunity to talk about Kevin Magnussen in that episode because his father was a very successful Formula One driver. And also Kevin Magnussen has a very interesting trajectory in Formula One because the first race he ever raced in Formula One was for McLaren and he finished P2.
Yeah.
And he never, ever finished that high ever again.
Yep.
Yeah. And oh my God, some of the quotes he said were just, he was just like, if I hit somebody, I hit somebody. And I was like, wait till the 2024 season, Kevin. Holy shit. Are you telling the future? Rich, what about yourself?
So I think, watching this with 2025 eyes and having been a fan of the sport for a while now, what you do get with a lot of the F1 fandom right now is a bit of a micro history where it is the established narrative of Drive to Survive right now is, okay, Red Bull is the big bad, and we are, we're going along with the dominance of Ferrari's like the Yankees, etc. That's not a dig at your video, James. It's very accurate. It's very much like you don't get to see where Red Bull came from. You don't get to see the overall boring dominance of Mercedes. And when you are a fan of F1, 9 years in a row or something like that, it was they won or maybe 8 years in a row, they won the championship.
It was 8 Constructors Championships, I believe.
Yeah. That's boring as hell. And it actually caused me to drop off my fandom for a while. In addition to the Ferrari dominance got boring for a while in the late 90s to early 2000s. Michael Schumacher won 5 championships in a row. Before that, it was McLaren dominance for a number of years. Before that, it was Williams dominance for 15 years in a row, something like that. A tremendous amount of time. And if you were a fan of any other sport, I'm sure Michael Jordan was exciting to watch, for all of us. It was extremely exciting for me as a kid growing up in Chicago. But if you're a fan of basketball and you're a fan of the Knicks per se, let's say, or the or the Portland Trailblazers or whatever, and you're watching one team be the only conversation for the entire league for an entire decade or more, It is boring. It is not fun to watch. And I think right now what we're seeing with all the newer fans of F1 is that Red Bull has this weird target on their back now where oh my God, I don't even remember a time where Red Bull wasn't winning. It's I do. It was a whole decade. So yeah, it was, it's just interesting to see what this show causes in terms of what it decides to focus on.
Sure. And Rich, and to the show's credit, I think it really does benefit from, Max, what you said. Mercedes and Ferrari were not a part of this first episode. So you don't even get to know these stars. You don't even get to interview Sebastian Vettel after he wins this race. Mm-hmm. And the show benefits from that intrigue of we're going to learn about everyone else and then hope to see them rise to power. But Max, what is your wait a minute moment?
I mean, yeah, Mercedes was doing their own negotiations, and Ferrari they have the trepidation. We know having the cameras. My wait a minute moment is Daniel Ricciardo ripping sick jumps on his dirt bike compared to American teams American sports who won't let their athletes do anything to risk bodily harm or injury. And in Formula One, these guys are just putting their bodies on the line for fun in their free time. It's just such an interesting juxtaposition to American sports and how cautious we are with athletes after so many injuries have happened to people for hobbies over the years. But not Danny. He's gonna rip some sick jumps in his BMX bike over some dirt hills.
Yeah, Hamilton going skydiving and all that stuff.
I'm very proud of you for not bringing up a certain sport. Well, we do have one more question. This is an in-flight question. Our in-flight question this week comes from Stephanie in Washington, who asks, what sport should have a Drive to Survive style show associated with it to bump up fandom? So I'm going to ask each of you, is there a sport that you think maybe could benefit from this Drive to Survive? We've seen it for golf. Netflix attempted it for tennis as well at one point in time. We'll talk about other spin-offs in a little bit relating just to F1 and the Tour de France. But is there a sport that you're like, I want to know more. I want to know more about the ownership, the back office, the management, and the athletes themselves. So, Max, I'm going to start off with you.
I'm going competitive darts. It is a sport where we can pack 10,000 people into a room. The world champion is a 16-year-old who looks like he's 48. There are just so many fascinating characters. If you've ever watched any darts on TV, I think that it is niche enough with big enough characters that you could absolutely get into those tales and create something really interesting.
Hell yeah.
James, what about yourself?
I think that's a difficult question because I think almost every sport has gotten this treatment since the success of Drive to Survive. Like NASCAR did it with Full Speed. We had Full Swing for golf. We had Breakpoint or whatever it was called for tennis. We had Six Nations for rugby, which I thought was very, very well done.
Awesome.
IndyCar has their own treatment of that with 100 Days to Indy. Like I mean, I guess like endurance racing could do it. Like 24 Hour of Le Mans is an interesting enough and iconic enough race where I feel like to have a closer look and behind the scenes look at that would be very interesting. I love the idea of darts because darts is like fascinating to me with the emergence of Luke the Nuke Littler or whatever his name is coming on the scene. It's just so funny to me to like, go on to Instagram or TikTok and see these auditoriums that are full of these berserk fans that are so excited to see these out of shape dudes throw darts at a board. But I fucking love it. It gives me FOMO and it makes me like want to get into it.
I mean, it's an awesome choice. Rich,
cornhole, I guess is my answer.
Oh yeah.
Ooh, hooey!
We're going on the Ocho. Rich, what about yourself?
So I know this is probably just a little too mainstream, but I actually can't think of a good example of this because we obviously have like Hard Knocks and 24/7 on the HBO side of things, but I don't really know how much. I would love to see like a documentary that's about like people on the fringes of making it to Major League Baseball. I think there is a extremely compelling story to be told about someone who is dancing in the middle of a nearly unlivable wage playing in places like Chattanooga, Tennessee and stuff like that. And then the actual like glitz and glamour of being a union MLB player where you command a certain amount of money. There's a lot of luxury that goes along with it. I do remember there was this one article during like the steroid investigation. It was kind of like an apology letter from one of the White Sox relievers saying that like, yeah, I unfortunately took steroids. Here's why I did it. Here's the realities of playing in Major League Baseball and bouncing back and forth between minor leagues and major leagues, and your career basically hinging on that. And whether or not you provide for your family or whether you're going to see your family at all, really. And I think that is a, like, it might be a complicated story to tell, but it is a fascinating, like, divide of classes between those two, between AAA ball and Major League Baseball. And I would just love to see that. That's
great. Yeah. There's a great film about that sort of world, if you've never seen it, called Sugar by Ryan Fleck and Anna Boden, about a, I believe, Dominican minor league player. It's a narrative. It's like, it's fiction, but there is like a level of authenticity to the film. And it's not about him making it to the majors. It's just it's a story about the thousands of people that, devote their life to playing baseball and pursuing this dream that don't make it to the majors, and like what happens after that. And it's just like a really fascinating world. And like you said, they make next to nothing playing in those. Exactly. feeder
James,
systems.
I thought you were going to say Bull Durham for a second.
I thought I was thinking you were too, actually.
It's just a great story. He's a minor league baseball player. It's about love for the game and love off the field.
I love that movie. I love Bull Durham.
All right, I'm going to make it a little bit dumber in here. So my non-serious answer is I would love a real-life version of Best in Show. I think that the people who show
Yes, please.
dogs are so intriguing, and I just want to hear them talk forever and hear them talk seriously about their chosen hobby. But then in a more exciting venture, I think the Professional Bull Riders League would be so interesting because holy shit, I literally this weekend was flying back from somewhere, and I was sitting next to a guy who runs a training facility for these guys, and hearing him talk about the training and stuff was insane. The lifestyle is wild. The amount of surgeries and damage that these people go through in their lifetime for very little money is just nuts. So
And the
there's
amount of
something
tips
there.
you gotta go through.
We just need to figure out how to film it appropriately. I think if we buy 100 GoPros, we got it.
I met a bunch of those guys about 20 years ago.
Whoa.
I worked in production in New York for like over 10 years, and I was a production assistant on it was like a Ford or a Chevy commercial, but it was in collaboration with the PBR tour, the Professional Bull Riding Tour, and they built a bull riding pen outside of Penn Station on 33rd and 8th.
This
and
just sounds like a bad idea.
brought in like tons of dump trucks full of dirt and shit, and like did bull riding outside as people were like commuting to work.
That is so cool.
And then I got to like go attend like the PBR Invitational at Madison Square Garden and stuff. But I met some of the guys, and like it's just like it is a fascinating life. And like you said, like they don't make a lot of money; they just do it because they love it. But yeah, it was very cool. It was super fun. If anyone has never gone to a PBR event, you got to go. It's a blast.
Hell yeah, brother.
I'm hosting a lot of PBR events in my backyard these days.
Well,
I think what would be really interesting about that too would be imagine the point of view from the clowns. Like obviously they're going to have to interview some of the clowns involved with PBR.
one clown interview, clown of the week. There we go. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie, for that in-flight question. Let's talk a little bit about the history and the legacy of this show. 6 seasons and 60 episodes with season 7 on the way. It is debuting tomorrow from if you are listening to this episode when it comes out, which is very confusing. If you're listening to this episode in a few weeks, then yes, the new season's out. As far as this show, there are a lot of spin-offs that have come from it and a lot of influence. Chasing Dreams was following the F2 championships. They did a Tour de France version on Netflix called Tour de France Unchained, which you guessed it, followed the Tour de France. And there's actually a plan to do the F1 Academy that will be coming out this upcoming year. For those who are unaware, that is the all-female driver feeder league for the F1, and it's super exciting to see that get a little bit more visibility. Surprisingly, there are awards, and I can't wait to talk about them. 23 nominations. This is our first instance where we have 2 pending award nominations, and we'll find out whether they win or not. But there were 6 wins, including editing awards and a Sports Emmy award. So, docuseries can win stuff. But that is the history and the legacy of this. I did have the plans of just saying who the winners were of every F1 series, but decided that would be way too much information. Rich,
Watch the show.
Watch the show. Watch F1. I'll say it right now. Watch racing in general. Racing is fun. Yeah. I highly recommend people start getting into IndyCar. I don't think 100 Days to Indy is all that compelling compared to Drive to Survive.
Agreed.
It's. I wish they would do a full season. I wish they didn't just end the season at the Indy 500 because there's like a ton of races left after that.
Yeah.
So my game of the week this week is about F1 American history. because now
There's
with
not
the
much.
explosive population, more than you think, buddy. And the I think what's different right now is that Formula One is experiencing this massive upswing of popularity because of this Netflix series, especially in the U.S. Like, you know, I mean, we were literally talking about the importance of individual driving weekends and stuff like that, where it's like, you know, who the hell wants to watch practice? When I went to my first F1 Grand Prix, it was in 2012. It was the Spanish Grand Prix. I got to see Pastor Maldonado's only win in Formula One. But when I went to practice 2 days before the actual race, I was able to sit at the start-finish line by myself in the grandstand because no one wanted to go to watch the practice. It didn't sell out. The race didn't sell out. It was the popularity was way down and has been for a while up until this documentary. So there are 2 Formula One American champions. That is, if you win the Drivers' Championship for the year. One is obviously Mario Andretti. He did it with the Lotus team, I believe, in '76. But the other one is Graham Hill, Phil Hill, Dan Gurney, or Alexander Rossi.
Phil Hill, because it makes me laugh.
King of the Hill, Phil Hill. Let's go for it. James, any guesses?
It's Graham Hill, right?
It is Phil Hill. Graham Hill is actually
British?
Graham Hill is British, yeah, and I don't believe related. All right, question number 2: the Triple Crown of racing is an F1 championship or winning a Monaco Grand Prix, depending on who you're talking to. The other 2 events are, and this is open-ended. What are the other 2 events?
It's the Indy 500 and the 24-hour of Le Mans.
That is correct. Hell
There
yeah!
you go.
All right, and
I'm going to the 24-hour Le Mans this year.
Are you really?
I was going to ask, are you going to the Indy 500? Because I would hope so.
I'm going to the Long Beach Grand Prix.
Oh, I'll see you there.
I think I'm.
Very
oh,
fun.
awesome! I think I'm going to get to interview some of the drivers, which should be fun.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think I'm going to the Indy 500. I would love to, but right now it's not happening.
I gotcha. Yeah, I'll hit you up for when I'm there. But I've been going the last like 2 or 3 years, and it is an absolute blast.
Yeah, well, last year was fun.
Yeah. All right. So there's one person to have accomplished this. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, there's one person who has actually accomplished the Triple Crown, and that is Graham Hill. There are 2 or 3 more drivers who are active right now who have 2 of the 3 completed, including Fernando Alonso.
Yep.
So the Formula One has not raced in which American city? Has not raced in Long Beach, California, Detroit, Dallas, Daytona, or Indianapolis.
It's Daytona.
I was about to say, I think that's correct.
It is indeed Daytona, Florida.
It was like the Grand Prix, United States West Grand Prix in Long Beach.
Yeah.
Detroit was short-lived. Dallas was 1 year in 1984. And it was at Indy for a while after Watkins Glen. And then there was that debacle with this tire thing in 2006 or whatever. Yeah.
Going to Daytona Beach would literally kill Charles Leclerc and George Russell.
Well, Rich, thank you so much for your game of the week. Gentlemen, we are getting the signal to box, but before we go, I have 2 questions for each of you. And the first one is based off of the pilot and the pilot alone. Would you watch more Drive to Survive? Seems pretty compelling. And then the second is the docuseries is continuing to rise. Court of Gold just came out and is extremely popular on Netflix. We're seeing Netflix continue. Hard Knocks is doing what it's been doing for over 20 plus years. Now talks of going to UNC Chapel Hill to do their offseason because the NFL said no thank you. So I'm curious.
You can watch All Access Polo on Netflix now.
Is
Water
there,
or horse?
Horse.
Oh, cool.
Is there room or is there space to continue doing more of this, or maybe just let sports be sports? There's already so much sports on TV. James, as our guest, I'm going to let you start.
I think there's absolutely room for it because I say this all the time, especially about motorsport, but it's the human element of all sport is what's going to continue to bring fans in and make them continue to stay and be interested. And I say this specifically about motorsport, like the races itself is thrilling, but without that human element, without stakes, without a reason to care, the spectacle is hollow and without meaning. So I feel like the more we get to know about the people involved and are invested in them, the better it is for the sport and the better it is for the fans because they have more insight into what they're watching and why they should care.
Awesome. Rich.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely giving it episode number 2. I feel like I've watched each season like 3 or 4 times through now. But in terms of the actual documentary filmmaking aspect of sports, James, you hit the nail on the head. It's the human element. Like, for some reason they're starting to do these like autonomous vehicle races and stuff in Dubai, and I'm like, who the hell would watch that? Why on earth would you watch that? No one is like, you're just, that's a science experiment at that point. That's not exciting.
Yeah.
Max, what about yourself?
Yeah, this definitely makes me want to hit next episode. It is a wonderful human interest story. The people we meet early on are just so well picked by the producers, and they lure you into it. These shows are going to continue to boom because it's not just a look at a past piece of history. It is real. It's in the moment. And if you're someone who follows it, there's a compelling interest to see what makes the final cut. If you are a golf fan, you want to see what makes it into full swing. If you're a racing fan, you want to see what makes it into Drive to Survive. Mm-hmm. And I think as long as you continue to find personalities and lenses in, you could justify the production.
Yep.
Yeah, and for myself, I'm definitely going to be watching the season 7 of Drive to Survive. But I think that my big thing is I hope that there are leagues and management groups that are willing to let the cameras in and willing to let them tell the stories that are going on, because we're seeing instances where people are made to look very silly when they're telling the truth about what happened. I'm looking at you, New York Giants, and the Saquon Barkley debacle, and saying, I don't want me to look silly. No cameras, please. So, yeah, if there are stories to tell, let's tell them. But just doing docuseries to do docuseries, I think there's a lot of stuff that's already out there that we could probably enjoy. But if there's a human story, let's tell it. Well, y'all, this is the end of this flight. James.
Can I say one thing real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to give props to Box for how well they are telling this story in Drive to Survive. And I know a lot of it is sort of like blown out of proportion for storytelling purposes and is not like entirely 100% accurate. But they do it very, very well and in a very compelling way. And a good example to show you like how, a lot of people say, you can make, anybody can make Formula One interesting. A counterpoint to that is there was a show that came out in like 2017 or 2018 called Grand Prix Driver that only had 4 episodes. And it followed McLaren F1 team during preseason testing all the way up getting ready for the season, and then it ends. And it's like narrated by Michael Douglas, and it was a year where Stoffel Van Dorn was a rookie and Fernando Alonso was the other driver. And it's an interesting story because at that time, like McLaren was like really, really struggling, and Zach Brown had just started come on as like the CEO of McLaren, but like they didn't have a lot of sponsors. They were having issues with the Honda engine, and like it's an interesting show to watch as a fan to get a glimpse of like what McLaren was like a few years ago, but it's pretty boring. It is not done well. So I just want to give Box to Box Films their flowers, and like they do very, very well.
And I'd also like to add they should hire all 4 of us. That's probably
that's great. I'll
crucial
spruce
aspect.
up my resume right now.
Yeah.
Let me just give you the lines to read at confessionals. I promise I'm not just recycling things from Selling Sunset. These are all original lines I came up with.
Cross your arms and say, I'm not here to make friends.
One thing about them tables, they're going to turn.
Oh. Well,
crazy.
James, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk about a sport that I think we all really love and a series that I think we all really love. If folks want to get a little bit more of you in their lives, where should they be looking for you?
Well, you can follow me on Instagram or TikTok at this James Coker. You can follow me on my YouTube channel, which is at Temple of Vroom. Nobody. I only have like 4,000 followers on my YouTube channel. So if you follow me anywhere, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I am also, I believe, in an upcoming episode of Matlock, unless I got cut out of it. and I've gotten cut out of it. That might happen. But also, I have a few lines in the movie Freaky Tales, which is coming out April 4th. So please check that out.
Awesome. Max, where can folks find you?
Oh, man, you could find me...
Try again.
You can find me at my brand new job putting the wheels on Haas cars and on all things social media at Maxwell Singh.
Rich?
You can find me doing hot laps through the hills of Belgium and just broke the 3-minute mark. Hell yeah, baby.
And
nice.
you can find me calling my phone Gene from now on. But if you're looking for me on social media, you can find me at Run Jeff Run. If you're looking for the TV Pilot's License, you can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can also see our smiling faces on YouTube and find us on all non-banned social media platforms. If you have a question about the show, maybe a question about our next episode, we are watching Paradise on Hulu. Woo. Everyone's talking about it. James Marsden is handsome, so why not? But if you want to ask a question, you can do it at tvpilotslicense.com or give us a call or leave us a text at 213-290-1713. Make sure to watch out for sneak peeks of some of the stuff that we have coming up. Once again, James Marsden, do I have to say more? But with the plane landing and the seatbelt sign off, we look forward to flying the bright skies of the TV world with you soon. Until next time, keep your eyes on the skies and your fingers on the dial.
Looking like a bunch of rock stars, but now we just look like a bunch of bikers.